questions to get through. So I'm going to begin by introducing our panelists, and then they are going to introduce themselves to you. So first up, and if you guys would just wave, we have City Manager Gary Suter, City Finance Director Kim Weber, Public Works Director John Snyder, and Parks and Recreation Director Angela Cosby. Thank you all for being here. We really appreciate it. And I know people are very interested to know how this is going to be impacting city services and projects. And so thank you for being so open to answer these questions from the community. And I do want to remind people that these are questions that we pull from the community, and so that's important for people to know. So first up, I'd love it if you guys would please tell us about your role with the city. So let's start with Gary.
All right. Hi, Lisa. And I want to thank you too for moderating all of these panels. What are we on, 20, 21, early, or something like that. So I appreciate the effort from the Steamboat pilot today to moderate these and help get information out to the community as we go through this crisis together. So I'm Gary Suter. I'm a city manager for the city of Steamboat Springs. And a lot of people don't know what a city manager is, but basically I'm kind of like the CEO of the city. So we are in a council manager form of government. So we have an elected council and then an appointed manager position. So my position is pretty much, I make it comparable to like the administrator of the hospital that works for the hospital board, or the school superintendent that runs the whole school district and reports to the school board. So city council is elected, I'm appointed, I serve at the pleasure of council, I have a contract with city council, and per our city charter, which I have a copy of here, I serve at their pleasure. And they basically can hire and fire city managers at will. So there is some political risk with these jobs. It's really important that we be transparent. My responsibility is basically to make sure that the operations of the city and that the services are delivered consistent with the direction of the city council. The way I like to separate it out is that the city council, they're the policy makers and we're the administrators. So they set the policy and we implement the policy as the manager. We are a full service city and have a whole range of departments. And I have several department directors here that you'll hear from today, but we have a planning department, IT, we have parks and recreation, we have police, we have fire, we have finance. Kim Weber is our finance director. Public Works is our biggest department. John Snyder, our public works director, is here, as well as Angela Cosby, who runs the Parks and Recreation department. We have HR, we have a city clerk, we have a municipal court. So it's a full service city. And we do a lot of stuff behind the scenes that just makes our life convenient here in Steamboat Springs. My last comment is to compare us, although we're not like a private corporation, but I kind of look at the people, just the structure, the people as the shareholders in a corporation, and then the city council as the board of directors, and then the city manager as the CEO. So that's kind of a good way to explain it to folks. And that's my position, is pretty much the CEO of the organization.
Thanks, Gary. That's a great way to explain it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Next up, Kim. And I also want to say we're very glad to partner with the city and the county on these panels. So thank you. Kim, can you please explain a little bit about your position with the city?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Lisa. So I'm Kim Weber. I'm the finance director. I also serve as the city's treasurer based on the charter. And my role really is to manage all of the revenue, the expenses of the city. I manage payroll and accounts payable, along with all of the sales tax collections, all the revenue collections, utility billing collections. And my role with city council is really to advise them and provide information. They have to make the tough decisions, but my role is to give them that information, give them alternatives, and provide options for them to then make those tough decisions. I work directly for Gary as part of the administration, and I'm part of the management team. And my role is really to oversee all of the financial operations for the city.
Thank you, Kim. Next up, John, could you describe your role?
Yes, thank you, Lisa. I am the Public Works Director. I also report directly to Gary. And Public Works is kind of a smorgasbord of a lot of different functions. Perhaps most visible is streets. We are responsible for plowing snow, painting crosswalks, overlays, all that kind of stuff. Steamboat Springs Transit is part of Public Works, as well as Bob Adams Airport, Fleet, our water and wastewater utilities, stormwater, and then we also manage most of the public construction projects that you see out and about in our public rights of ways. So that's a little bit about Public Works.
Thanks, that's a lot. Angela, please tell us about your role.
Good morning. Thank you, Lisa. So I'm Angela Cosby. I'm the Parks and Recreation Director for our city. I also report directly to Gary Suter, our city manager. So within Steamboat, the Parks and Recreation Department, one division is our parks, trails, and open space, and that's probably the most self-explanatory. Oversee the Amber River Core Trail, all of our athletic fields, volleyball courts, basketball courts, skate parks, bike parks, a lot of our biking and hiking trails as well. We also have a recreation division, which includes the Howelson Hill Ice Arena, youth and senior programs, some special events like the Town Challenge Bike Series and Ski Ascent Series, and our adult sports athletic programs that we put on for our community. I also oversee the Howelson Hill ski area, as well as the rodeo grounds, Haymaker Golf Course. We partner with the Botanic Park, which is a city park, but we have a really great board that we work with, the volunteers there who provide that service. And I oversee the tennis center and our concessionaires there.
Thank you. And again, we're reminded about all the amenities that we have here in Steamboat that you're in charge of. So thank you. So let's start with the basics. Kim, can you tell us how the city is funded and where do our dollars come from to support city services and programs and all of that?
Absolutely, yeah. So the city is funded primarily by sales tax. And when I talk about the city, I usually talk primarily about the general fund because that's the most visible fund. That's where we pay for our firefighters and our police officers and our streets and our parks and rec. So the general fund is funded 65% by sales tax. And it's a 4% sales tax that's charged to both, of course, our community members and our tourists. And of that, in a normal year, maybe not this year, but of that, 40% of that typically comes from tourists, and about 60% of that comes from our locals. We also get revenue from parks user fees, ambulance fees. We refer to all of those as our user fees. We rent some facilities out. We get some funding from that. And then also we get funding from government grants. We get probably about $600,000 to $700,000 a year for our transit facility. So that's significant. And we also get some other intergovernmental revenue, a little bit from the county and some of our other state government agencies. But really, the city really relies and runs on sales tax.
And just because there is some confusion, the city currently does not have a property tax outside of, could you explain that? Because I think some people think you are collecting a property tax.
Absolutely, yeah. So it does get confusing because people who live in the city limits say, I do pay property tax. I get a property tax bill and I pay property tax, which is true, but you pay property tax to the schools and you pay property tax to the cemetery and to the library and to the county. New in 2020 is a 2 mil property tax for the city that is earmarked specifically for fire and EMS. It can be used for operations and capital. Right now, we're holding it aside for a central fire station at this point, but council will be having discussions on that. But we don't have a general property tax in the city of Steamboat Springs to help fund our operations other than the fire EMS one. And that brings in about $1.5 million. And this will be the first year that we will receive that. But we rely heavily on sales tax, which is unusual for a city. And another confusing part is when you go to the store, you pay 8.4% in sales tax, and the city only actually receives 4% of that. The other amounts go to the state and the county, and there's a dedicated city school tax. But really, we operate on that 4% sales tax.
Thanks so much for that clarification.
Yeah.
Gary, the next question is for you. So you have worked with many different local governments, and actually Kim has just answered that some. I'm so sorry, I jumped ahead. But is the city's funding structure unique, and what challenges does that present? And when it comes to unique, I know I would love to know how many other cities in Colorado operate so heavily on sales tax. Thank you.
Sure thing, Lisa, and I can provide a little more detail on that. And yes, Kim did provide some clarifications, and it's important people understand that, because there are multiple taxing entities out there, and being the city, you know, and being as transparent as we are, we have a lot of people look at us and say, you know, well, why am I paying all these taxes, and why don't you have all this money? Well, it doesn't all come to us. But in terms of unique, I'd say in Colorado, this funding structure for the city of Steamboat Springs is not that unique in terms of the mix of revenue sources. So you look at property tax, you look at sales tax, you look at user fees, intergovernmental revenues that we get from the federal or the state government, and those types of things. So they all kind of contribute to the whole revenue pie in the general fund. What does make us unique from other municipalities is our overdependence upon sales tax. And that's what Kim had alluded to. So the fact that 2/3 of our revenue for our general fund, and the general fund provides all of the general services for the city coming from sales tax, that translates into risk. And so I said this when I came here and took this job a few years back, that we're snow farmers, and being dependent upon the ski industry and packing in all these people in here, and packing them into the mountain, and packing them into the restaurants and our businesses, and paying that sales tax the city has, we look up to the sky and say, boy, I hope we have a big snow year, because if we don't get snow, that can directly impact our sales tax revenue. So that translates into risk. That risk has been brought more to the forefront with the COVID-19 crisis. So when they shut down the ski area, it was like, oh my gosh, they just turned the spigot off on our major revenue source. And that sent a giant red flare across the bow saying, we got to respond to this, and we got to respond to this now. And we'll talk about that a little bit. So the answer is our mix of revenue sources are not that unique when you look across cities and towns in Colorado. We're pretty much a sales tax based revenue-based state. We depend upon a lot of tourism. A lot of people come in here. A lot of the Front Range cities have sales taxes. A lot of the counties have sales taxes. You talk to people from the East Coast, say from Massachusetts, they're used to massive property taxes. And yeah, we had a 40-year drought on property taxes here. That's what made us unique. We had zero property taxes to fund our general fund. We still have zero property taxes to fund our general fund. We have an earmarked property tax. We ended that 40-year drought, as Kim had said, the election of last year in November 2019, by allocating and earmarking a $2 million property tax, which is pretty small property tax for fire EMS services. So I appreciate the electorate supporting that. But what we really need here to help mitigate some of that risk, it'd be nice to have a reasonable property tax, especially to kind of balance the equation between the part-time residents that have second homes here and those of us that live here year-round, to help fund and help buffer these ups and downs that you see with sales tax based upon tourism, based upon snow, based upon a pandemic. these can all affect our sales tax revenues. One more point is the way to mitigate that in other communities in which I've worked where we had an overdependence on sales taxes with reserves. So it's just like if you have a revenue source that's volatile, you mitigate that with reserves. And we have healthy reserves here, fortunately, but we are dipping into them now, and we're dipping into them the second time. So we're getting very close to the threshold where we cannot do that anymore. So we're tapping into those rainy day funds, and it's raining. So our mix is pretty common, but the overdependence upon sales tax makes us unique.
Thank you, Gary.
Sure.
So Kim, how much revenue has the city lost due to COVID-19? And what are your projections for the rest of the year?
Yeah, so March is our biggest month of sales tax collection. And so when things shut down in March, we knew that there was going to be some impact. We might not have known that it was going to be quite as much as it was, but our March sales tax was down by 30%, which was over $1 million. So just those couple weeks of March, right off the bat, the city lost $1 million. Then, fortunately, April and May are our two lowest months of sales tax collections, and I'm estimating that we'll probably come in about $500,000 short on each of those months. So where we sit right now in just sales tax, we've lost about $2 million. Looking out to the rest of the year with lodging starting to open back up a little bit slowly, things making its way around, I still estimate probably on the good side, $4.5 million more that we'll lose in sales tax. So I'm thinking around $6 to $6.5 million of sales tax that we'll be short. We're also have other revenue, as we talked about, user fees that we won't be collecting because facilities won't be open. Special events could be canceled. And so based on the preliminary projections, that's probably about $2 to $2.5 million. So in the general fund, I'm estimating about 20% decrease, about an $8.5 million decrease. And so 20% of all of our revenue that we receive, we're expecting we won't receive this year. And when we look at the capital fund, initial reaction to that is about $2 million, which it's funded by building use tax and excise tax. And so those are the two major areas that we've been focusing on and looking at projections for.
Thank you.
Sure.
So talking about, losses of that magnitude, Gary, let's start with you. How is the city going to adjust to that loss? What has the city done to address those revenue shortfalls? So we'll start with you, Gary, and then let Kim also chime in.
Great. Yeah, having been through several recessions, including the Great Recession in 2008, I learned lessons from those, and that was to respond quickly. So as soon as the ski area shut down, I thought this is going to have a major impact on our revenue sources, and we needed to act quickly. And so we mobilized as a staff and put out directives to go through first round of budget cuts. So we were out in front of this and out in front of most other municipalities, I'm proud to say, because I just know that it was going to have a significant impact based upon experience. So we went through phase one of budget cuts. Then March sales tax came in. We saw that was 30% down. It was like, oh, that was worse than expected. So we initiated phase two of budget cuts, and we have proposed those to City Council. We had extensive late night discussion with City Council earlier this week about those phase two budget cuts, of which they were supportive of. This is when things get real, when we start seeing the service cuts that we're talking about and programs being canceled and service levels being reduced. then you realize that this is a real financial situation that we have to deal with. So we have been through, in phase one budget cuts, the first thing we did was what we did in 2008. And we basically took a 10% pay cut across the board, except for some essential services like public safety, police, and fire. So they remain, because we knew that their roles were going to be increasing in this crisis. So so we've kept them intact, but everybody else took a 10% pay cut, and we concurrently reduced our hours from a 40-hour work week to a 36-hour work week. So that's forced us to become more efficient and effective at what we do, and that's created some challenges in some departments and divisions. So we've had that kind of 10% furlough for all the employees. We've had to furlough other full-time employees temporarily. We've had some layoffs, unfortunately, in the positions where projects have been canceled. And these are very, very difficult decisions. But again, experience has dictated that we have to be out in front of this. And, you know, if the economy recovers, hopefully quicker than expected, we can try and restore some of these services. And I know that's what council is hoping to do as well. But we have to have a balanced budget. So when we see this dip in revenue, we have to adjust our revenue downward and then adjust our expenditures accordingly. So again, it goes back to the sales tax. And when tourism takes a dive off the table like it has, and the summer's looking bleak as well. I know June's basically canceled. The jury's out on July and August. Almost all the major events for the summer are canceled. So the bleeding's going to continue for a while, and we need to stay on top of it and try and be adaptable and ahead of the curve as much as possible. And I'll let Kim weigh in as well with a little bit of the detail.
Yeah, go ahead, Kim. Thank you.
Yeah, so we've really tried to take a balanced approach and not hit one area too hard with this and completely dilapidate any of our services or any of our programs. So I'm going to share this pie chart just to give you a visual of what we've done. So this pie chart shows, in total, this pie chart is about $10.5 million. And so right off the bat, we're thinking that we're going to be $10.5 million down in revenues. So we've tried to take a balanced approach, like I said. And so the operational cuts that Gary talked about are here. We've made about $4.5 million of operational cuts throughout the year that are planned for 2020. And that includes the furloughs and the layoffs and the reduction in services. But we don't want to completely get rid of services because we do want to be able to recover. So as Gary talked about with our healthy reserves, we do plan on using about $2.8 to $3 million of reserves to try to backfill and not cut as many services. But we have to be careful with that because we're in this for the long haul, and we need to protect those services next year as well. And so we've also cut out about $2.5 million out of capital projects that we had planned for 2020. And we'll be starting actually our 2021 budget process in the next month, and we'll be looking at future years. But we wanted to get ahead of things, reduce the capital. We still have a lot of capital projects planned, but we did want to put the brakes on some of those for right now to see where we're headed. And then we have secured about $930,000 of CARES funding. Primarily, this is going to transit to help with the regional line, the local line. And so we have been able to protect some of our transit with those funding as well.
Thank you, Kim. So Angela and John, we're going to get you involved in the discussion. So we've been talking about these cuts. So how have these cuts, affected city services and capital projects in your respective departments? And what decisions have been made and what might be expected this summer? So let's start with Angela. How about Parks and Rec?
Yeah, so the coronavirus and the emergency response to that has affected the services we're able to provide in one way. And then combining that with now the financial crisis and the reductions there. Um, so we're trying to link the two together as much as possible so we can provide as many services as we absolutely can to our community during this time, while absolutely taking in mind community safety, public health orders, and how to combine it all together. So the first thing we did is focusing on what we can provide versus what we can't with the public health orders and all of the safety protocols that need to be taken in place. And that is really just getting people outside versus inside and keeping as many of our amenities outside open as possible. At first, and we're still working through some of those. So the initial response was close down public restrooms, playgrounds, all basketball courts, volleyball courts, bike parks, skate parks, anywhere where people would really meet up and join. And as those public health orders are changing, we're slowly starting to open some of those back up. And we're not currently looking at having service reductions to those areas because of the budget reductions. So that's some really good news. Where we're seeing our impacts from the budget reductions are to our recreation division largely, so the ice arena. While some ice arenas across the state are able to open up with certain mitigation protocols right now, we aren't able to because of budget reductions, not necessarily because of state health orders right now. So that's been really hard and impactful for the staff there, as well as all the community members that the ice arena serves. Where else we've seen it with our youth programs. These are two big areas between the ice arena and youth programs where we're seeing the largest service reductions. And we've seen the same with a lot of childcare providers having to close down and now just starting to slowly reopen. We could be doing the same right now with the public health orders and starting to provide those services again. But due to the budget reductions, the number of children we'd be able to provide services for is decreased so much for the same price that we used to be able to. And we really have to keep in mind, as we are in this for the long haul, is that if we're not serving 20 or 50 children now, it might mean that as the coronavirus is under more control and as public health orders change, that we could provide that same service to several hundred children in the fall or even next year. So we're trying to prioritize taking that, unfortunately, that really hard impact now so we can provide even better services for more people down the road. So as we look at summer, our budget reductions do include not providing those services through the end of summer. When it comes to our adult sports and special events, we're on a similar tier, but a little bit different. Those programs and services are much easier to get back up and going and more efficient to get up and going for our community. So we're still hitting pause on those and we're still suspending those services, but we've allowed a little bit of flexibility come later in the summer as public health orders change to provide some type of athletic service, adult sports, or maybe add in one or two of the bike series races to come back to our community if possible. They are probably going to look a little bit different than they did in past. We probably won't be seeing full season leagues, but maybe we can offer a weekend tournament or some skills clinic and try to get some fun going. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you, Angela. Yeah.
Yep.
And it is nice. I'm sitting here in my office looking out at Howson and seeing kids at the skate park out there. So we're lucky to have those facilities back open. And I know you guys worked hard to do that. Thank you. John, can you tell me how this is impacting the various departments that fall under you? And kind of ahead. Thank you.
Sure. So a lot of what Public Works does is behind the scenes, and it's not particularly noticeable, at least in the short term. And so a lot of what we've had to do is cutbacks to things that maybe people aren't going to notice, cutbacks to stormwater maintenance, guardrail maintenance, an assortment of engineering plans and studies. But really what has been impacted pretty heavily from the public side is Steamboat Springs Transit. Steamboat Springs Transit was an essential aspect of getting a lot of our essential workers to our jobs. And so we worked very hard to clean and disinfect our buses as much as possible. And then, the other thing we did is, and this sounds kind of counterintuitive, but even though ridership was low, we actually kept the number of buses out on the road the same. Because the more buses that you can keep out on the road, then the less dense the passengers are in the bus, so they can, try to achieve social distancing. So really, our bus drivers were probably exposed to more instances of people carrying the virus than just about anybody. And they really did a great job of keeping an essential service up and running.
And John, just looking ahead to the summer, do you see any changes to transit that you might have to make?
I do. The service reduction that the community is going to see is that we are changing the yellow line from its traditional fixed route status to an on-call status. So we're still going to do the yellow line, but now if you want to ride the yellow line, we're asking that you give us a call, and then we'll send a shuttle up there to pick you up.
Thank you. Gary, is there anything you'd add to what Angela and John shared?
Sure. What I would add is that just adaptability and remaining flexible. It's one thing to cut these services, but it's another thing to try and dial them back up. And they all have varying degrees of complexity when you're trying to turn on and off city services like a water spigot. It just doesn't happen that easily. So the phase one impacts, I'd say, mostly the community didn't see. I mean, these were internal things that we did internally that we were trying to be conscious of the community impact and really the impact upon the city council too, because once you cut services, people complain to city council and they complain to staff as well. So phase one impacts, I'd say most of the community didn't see. The phase two impacts, they're going to see and feel and hear and touch. They will see them. So there will be actual reductions in service, just as John and Angela had described. Hopefully, and again, I talk about flexibility because hopefully if we can dial some of these back up, particularly as we go into the winter season, because November, December, hopefully the ski mountains open. We don't know what skiing is going to look like in the winter of 2021, but we may have to, dial back up for to be a full service city by then, assuming that we have the revenues to do that. So we need to be flexible and adaptable as we try and reduce city services and then turn them back on as the seasons vary. And the summer's looking pretty gloomy right now, with pretty much June being canceled and all the major events being canceled. So things are pretty much dialed back for the summer, with kind of a refocus on areas, just as Angela described, with parks, trails, and open space is going to be the big emphasis. And hopefully we can get some other things up and going again, but they're going to require some resources. For example, if we open up playgrounds, we're going to have disinfectant protocol for that. So it's a changed landscape, but those are the two messages I wanted to communicate. It's just community impact and remaining adaptable and flexible as we adjust these services for the public.
Thank you, Gary. And Gary did mention about fall and winter, and I know things change so quickly, but if you guys could look into a crystal ball and kind of look ahead to what services might look like in the fall and winter. John, any insight into that?
Yeah, so it's definitely going to impact our snow plowing and our snow removal. So first, just a little bit of background. In the city, we distinguish between snow plowing, which is what we do during the storm to clear the parking lots and the streets, and then snow removal, which is what we do after the storm ends, where we go through and pick up the piles and truck them off. And so for the first few weeks of winter, the snow plowing is going to be affected. And we're probably not going to be able to get to the residential streets as quickly as we have been in the past. So residential streets will probably get plowed a few hours later, potentially even after the storm has ended. That will last till probably early to mid-December, at which point we'll try to be up to normal. Now, the thing that's going to last probably the entire winter is our snow removal is going to be much slower. And so everybody knows when you drive down Lincoln Avenue in the wintertime, you see big windrows of snow built up along the curbs on Lincoln and on the side streets. we try to remove those after 4 inches of snow has fallen. Due to these budget cuts, we won't be able to remove those until 6 to 8 inches of snow have fallen. So we're looking at cutting our snow removal either by a third or a half. So that's going to be a pretty substantial impact to services this winter.
Thank you, John. Angela, how about you? How do you think, what are Parks and Rec services looking like fall and winter?
Sure. The easiest answer is to say we're continuing to evaluate it. And what I mean by that is to this point, we've been able to avoid substantial reductions to the Howelson Hill ski area. And right now, we're still looking at being able to have a traditional season of operation there. If this continues and we continue having financial challenges with sales tax not coming in, we're probably going to have to start working on that. We're having more public discussions with council on that. Internally, staff, we are looking at different scenarios there, and we're also working with our partners, the Steamboat Springs Winter Sports Club, to see what different ideas they have for there. And we'll probably end up presenting council at some point in time with some different phases on options and what they can do to look at service reductions there, anywhere from full season to full closure and several options in between.
Thank you. Gary, is there anything you'd add to that?
No, I think they covered it, Lisa. I mean, there's more to add, but there's just so many uncertainties. It's really difficult to predict what the fall and winter. I mean, fall's going to be pretty much off season, and hopefully we can get some tourists here during the leaf peeping season. But I have asked Rob Perlman, COO of Steamboat Skiing Resort, for some help in terms of what's the skiing industry going to look like this winter of 2021. And I'm sure once you're out on the mountain, it's fine. There'll be plenty of social distancing. It's just getting people up the mountain, that uphill transportation, ski lifts, gondolas, restaurants, all that sort of stuff. Who knows what that's going to look like? But I'm sure there are lots of discussions going on in the corporate boardrooms of Alterra and Vail Resorts. And I'd love to be able to get a little bit of insight of what their model looks like, operational model looks like, so that can help us predict what our revenues are going to look like, and then consequently the services that we provide.
Thank you, Gary. Next question is, obviously, COVID-19 has affected individuals, businesses, nonprofits. So what are some of the things that the city has done to support residents, nonprofits, and the business community? Kim, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so from a finance perspective, the city budgets for about $550,000 of community support allocation funds. And we distributed about half of that in January, and the other half will be distributed in July. So that's really helped the nonprofits. That's an annual contribution. And then from a business perspective, we delayed sales tax filing, actually payments, a month for March and April. So we asked all businesses to file their taxes, but we gave them 30 days to pay it. It's a little counterintuitive because sales tax is actually collected from the customer and it's never the business's money, but we wanted to be flexible. We understood that there were cash flow issues. We asked the businesses to file because in order for us to provide projections on what the sales tax is, we really wanted that information. I do think there was some confusion because we were missing probably almost 500 sales tax returns that didn't get filed. But we're working hard to gather that information so we can provide good financial projections. And then the other thing we've done is we've waived all the penalties and interest for our utility customers, and as well as not doing water shutoffs at this time.
Thank you. John, what have you guys done to help the community?
Sure. if there is any sort of remote silver lining to any of this, is that there's never been a better time to do road work. And so we did every bit of road work out there that we could possibly do because traffic was light. And thankfully we had a temperate spring as well. So that really helped. But again, a lot of what we do is behind the scenes, keeping utilities up and running, things of that nature. But then, I would just reiterate, I think the single most important thing we did to keep the community up and running was keeping that bus service online. We got to the point where the only people riding the buses were people that had to ride the buses because they really had no other options. And so we were putting in a Herculean effort to keep those buses cleaned and disinfected so that our passengers could stay safe. And a lot of our riders, I think, were riders that we all took for granted before. Our gas station attendants, our grocery store clerks, our custodial staff. And it was our responsibility to make sure that they got to work so that the community could get the services they need.
Thanks, John, for highlighting that.
Uh-huh.
Angela, how about your department?
Yeah, I am so thrilled with all of our staff. They've done such a great job through this, and they've received more than enough recognition for this very first one. At the start of this in March, it was keeping Hallison Hill Nordic Trails open and the additional grooming we did there. So thank you so much to those staff members who went above and beyond, working 7 days a week to do that. Then it was assisting our emergency operations center with testing sites and with medical surge facilities at Hallison Hill, the rodeo grounds, the ice arena, and the tennis center. That's been a big help. Our recreation staff have done the busy bags for some of our kiddos to be able to take home and have different activities to stay busy at home. This, as well as when the school district was unable to deliver and prepare lunches, our staff helped out with distribution of those lunches for those couple weeks. And then lastly, very similar to Public Works, it was keeping our parks, trails, and open spaces open to the public during the stay-at-home orders. Our staff were still coming in, keeping those facilities maintained, starting sanitation practices, garbage removal, etc.
Thank you. And I know I heard from a lot of people that keeping those trails open kept them sane to have that outlet. So thank you for that. Gary, would you add as far as what the city's done to support residents and businesses and nonprofits?
Sure, happy to, Lisa. And the one that I'm most proud of is that the city was just able to maintain our levels of service, at the high levels of service that we provide and that the community expects. And that made me really proud of the staff to be able to cut our budgets and make these sacrifices, but still maintain high levels of service. And to add on, I had a list here. I was checking them off as staff was going through them. But just Parks and Rec, going back to Parks and Rec, getting that ice rink ready for the hospital surge was a big effort. Working with the Emergency Operations Center, I know they had checked around to various facilities and finally it's like, the city facilities look like they're the best ones. So getting the ice off of there, setting up basically a pop-up hospital at the ice rink in collaboration with UC Health was a big thing to help out the community. And the beds are still there. Hopefully we don't need that hospital search, but we'll wait till we get directives from the EOC to take that down. What we're doing right now, when this whole crisis started, I just thought, wow, this is, I hate the word unprecedented. I saw a piece on that on Sunday morning and it's just everywhere. And I've never seen anything like this. And everybody's kind of like panicking and what are we doing and what's going on? We're getting mixed messages from the federal government and state government. I thought, we're the local government. We need to get out in front of people. So we thought about the resources that we have here, which is our little TV studio and Channel 6, and then reached out to you, Lisa, and we've done close to a couple of dozen of these community panels and the daily updates from Commissioner Beth Melton and our council president, Jason Lacey, just so people could see that our community leaders are here, that we care, that we're talking candidly to them, and that we're addressing this to the maximum extent that we can. So that's all made me very proud. And yeah, so again, thank you for helping facilitate this, but I really think it went a long way to help get the word out through all the social media and television and everything else to say, here's who we are, this is what we're doing, and you know, please stay calm, let's flatten the curve, let's work together to get through this. So very proud of the effort that we've made in this community.
Thank you. And I will say, I have editors from across the state reaching out to me, you know, how are you guys doing this? And I said, it's just a very good cooperative partnership between city, county, and the news organization. So thank you guys. So Gary, probably something we hear a lot about is, you know, our special events. You know, we have so many in the summer, so many people look forward to them. And so we have a lot of questions about what is going to happen with special events and who makes those decisions on what special events are canceled, what continue. So if you could answer that, I think that would offer some clarity for our audience.
Yeah, try and provide some clarity. It's kind of complex, and it is an evolving situation. I mean, right now, with all the discussion about Triple Crown, which is just one of many major events that we host as a community throughout the summer, we're all waiting for the governor's next public health order. And right now, you know, it's limiting groups to 10. Well, that pretty much wipes any special event off the face of the earth. So, because they all depend upon bringing groups of people together and congregating. So in terms of who makes it, so we're waiting on that. We have to be flexible and wait till we get those decisions. And there'll be future council meetings where we're going to be talking about this and trying to come up with guidelines and protocol to be able to conduct these. So in terms of the special events, some are contractual. We have contracts for special events, and the city does issue special event permits. So like most other cities, if you're going to have a big event that impacts traffic or that you need porta potties for, or street closures, that sort of thing, we issue special event permits, and there are fees associated with that. And we issue those administratively. So that varies from city to city. The city of Steamboat Springs, those are issued administratively. With those permits, there are always conditions. So if somebody's going to have a big biking event that's going to require a big congregation of people and traffic and road closures, we need to coordinate with police department and the fire EMS department and the streets so that they can get out there with the barricades and the cones. And so it's kind of a collaborative effort to make these events happen. There's a lot of city support services that enable them to occur in the least impactful fashion as possible. They all have some sort of community impact, and some people are more tolerant of those than others. Personally, I like them. I like the vibrancy. I like to see the variety of people and the diversity of people that we get here coming through here from around the world, literally, for our special events. And some are more locally owned and produced, and other ones are not. But we have to be guided by the state and county laws with regard to these public health protocols. So that's the major impact right now. And that's why our summer has effectively, for all intents and purposes, been canceled. And you know, most of the event owners, even in August, are going, you know, I just don't see these health orders releasing to the point to where we can have a major race. You know, Steamboat Gravel is canceled, unfortunately. They were scheduled for mid-August, and I think they had 2,500 participants in that. And that gives you an example too. A lot of these events are being canceled by the event owners. We do issue permits for them, but most of these events are owned by private companies or private nonprofit corporations. And they're the ones that schedule them. They're the ones that coordinate them. Sometimes they hire event producers to produce them. And then we provide support services for them to be able to hold the event. So these event owners, like the rodeo and the pro rodeo board, they get together and they make a decision. That was a tough one to hear earlier in the week, that the pro rodeo series is going to be canceled for the entire summer. Yeah, tough decisions, but that came from these event owners, and they're the ones that have to make these decisions in their own best interest. And talking to Brent Romick last week, before they met with the board, I had a nice conversation with Brent. We just talked about the reality of what's happening and the timing of when these restrictions are going to be lifted and how dependent they are, what kind of capacity, not capacity, but what kind of ticket sales they need in order to be viable. And the big factors of, protecting their assets and protecting their reputation. The rodeo board made a business decision and said, just best to cancel, protect their assets for the summer, protect their reputation. Let's aim for summer of 2021. So that's kind of how the decisions are made. I had to make the decision on the July 4th fireworks and laser show. That is a city-owned event, and that's a part of our budget. We pay for the fireworks. We've always had a great contribution from Tim Borden for the fireworks show, and the laser show. We started booking that as a backup in the event there were drought conditions. So we had them both booked for this summer, and both due to the reality of, are these restrictions going to be lifted to where we can allow a congregation of 5, 8, 10,000 people downtown? What's the probability of that? It's probably very, very unlikely. So the best thing to do, and given the revenue picture and the need to make budget cuts, we just had to make a decision on that. And they're very tough decisions to make, but we have to make them in the context of what we think will be the best thing for the community. And it's tough. They're very difficult decisions. But that's, some of the events that have been canceled. Steamboat lacrosse tournament, the Steamboat Marathon. That's the biggest fundraiser for the chamber. So the chamber is going to be impacted by this as well. Rocky Mountain Mustang Roundup, was supposed to happen in June around Father's Day. I had a conversation with them, and they basically came to the same conclusion, that they just didn't see the public health regulations loosening up to the point to where they could bring in, hundreds and hundreds of people and gather in one place. Red, Whites, and Brews in the boat, free summer concerts. Again, that's a separate board, a separate organization, and they've made a business decision to cancel those for June, July, and August. I don't know, Labor Day, we'll see what happens. Again, I mentioned the fireworks and laser show, Steamboat Gravel. So those are the big ones, and it continues. There's a lot of folks that are still planning on having events, and I have a list of those. I won't read through them, but there's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 major events that are still in a wait and see mode, and just hoping that they can hold their event. And we'll just have to wait and see what their decisions are as well.
Thank you, Gary. Next, we'll direct this to John. How is the city handling development, and are there any changes with engineering, planning, and building services? Is that one for you to answer, John?
Yes, that's for me. So there is a heck of a lot going on behind the scenes amongst the employees to make this work. And ultimately what we're after is, we don't want there to be changes to the public for development review or building permit services. So all of that is still taking place. The only difference, and we only instituted this about a week ago, is that for our development review services, we're going to need 1 extra week. So typically we try to turn our reviews around in 2 weeks' time. Now we're going to need 3 weeks due to staff furloughs. But other than that, everything should be business as usual.
Thank you. Gary, is there anything you would add to that?
No, that's pretty much what I heard from my staff. And Rebecca Bessie is our Community Development Planning Director, and consistent with what she's saying as well. And what I would add is, it's pretty typical and pretty common, especially in these resort communities, where you get a crush of development applications springtime, and especially around now. And then you got some latecomers that'll come in June, and they'll want to start building by August. And it's like, well, no, you're at the back of the line. So it's not uncommon to say, you know what, we got a queue, and first come, first serve, and we'll get through these processes as quickly as possible. But it's not uncommon to say there's going to be a delay.
Thank you. So we're down to last 3 questions. So I think these are important, so we may go a little bit long, just to let our audience know, because I'd like to get through all of them. Gary, this is for you. So what happens if the economy doesn't recover as quickly as we'd like? What other cuts could be on the table, and when will you be looking at this?
Sure. Our budget director, Sue Davies, down the hall from me, has one of those 8 balls, the crystal ball, you can turn it over. So we're thinking of using that. But seriously, I had an emphasis as an undergraduate in economics. So Scott Ford and I had a lot of interesting conversations about economics and the economy. The economy will recover. I mean, it always does. It's just a matter of how long. And, when we had the Great Recession, I looked at the history of recessions since I've been an adult, and I think at that time I'd been through 12. It was amazing. I've been through 12 recessions. And the average recovery time for all the recessions, including the dot-com bust, was 18 to 24 months before, whatever the markers were, whether it was money supply or stock market or the Dow or whatever, 18 to 24 months for recovery. And the Great Recession took longer. So that was a longer recovery before they could actually say we're not in the recession mode anymore. So I know that the economy will recover. It's just a matter of how long it's going to take. I do believe the professionals, when they say this is not a V-shaped curve that we're just going to spring back, that it's more of an L-shaped. And so we've kind of dropped off the cliff, and it's going to be flat for a while. So I'm planning through next year. I think it's going to be 18 to 24 months before we recover, unless something extraordinary happens, like a vaccine. And if a vaccine happens, then everybody's going to go, yay, and then we can take off on the upward projection. But I think in terms of what's on the table, everything's going to be on the table. I mean, we did, I think it was three budget cycles ago, either 2 or 3 budget cycles, we did an alternative budget scenario. What if the economy fell off the table? What would we cut? And it was dramatic. I mean, we just had to kind of slash everything, and that impacted community services. It impacted chamber funding and summer marketing. It impacted our service delivery to all of the community, including things like snow plowing and snow removal and core trail maintenance. I mean, it was a dramatic picture, and it was kind of an emergency planning exercise. And here we are having to apply that. So the main principle is that we need to be flexible. We need to be adaptive. We need to continually evaluate and respond and be responsive to the economic conditions that are surrounding us. So right now, yeah, it's very difficult, and we've had to shut that spigot off on a lot of city services, and we need to be prepared if the economy does recover to turn that back on and ramp them back up. And in some cases, it can be pretty quick. In other cases, it can take time because you have to hire people and train them and put them on the staff and put them on the job. So, so we look at it regularly, and particularly the marker is sales tax revenue. So as we get each month's report on sales tax revenue, that kind of tells us, okay, are we on track? Are we going to have to cut more? Can we loosen it up a little bit and start to dial things back up? So it's a continual evaluation. And I like to use kind of crowdsourcing for this too. As we look at sales tax projections for 2021, who knows what's going to be, or who knows what the price of gas per gallon is going to be. So it helps. You see the experiments where you get a number of people in a room and they can guess how many jelly beans are in a jar. And if you get 300 or 500 people, they come pretty darn close. So I like opening up the process, and we'll pound on that at staff level, and then we'll roll it out to city council. We'll have public discussions on it, and the more people that weigh in, I think the more accurate we can get in terms of what the future looks like. So, but we need to stay flexible, and we need to adapt to changing conditions.
Thank you, Gary. Kim, people want to know if the city has incurred new or additional expenses as a result of this pandemic.
Yeah, we have incurred some additional expenses, primarily around additional cleaning expenses, personal protective equipment expenses, especially in the fire department, ambulance services. And then we've incurred additional technology expenses from people working from home, doing additional community outreach, additional platforms for our meetings, just changing our services. However, the greatest impact on expenses has really been the reallocation of resources. So people are spending time doing different things than their normal job. Whether it be that we are reworking the whole budget, whether it be additional legal expenses, additional time spent where someone would be doing a different activity, but now they're cleaning the buses, or they are building plexiglass for our desks, or so it's really the reallocation of what we would be typically working on. But our greatest impact, really, as you've heard throughout this whole meeting, is really the impact on our revenues. We haven't incurred a ton of additional expenses that we hadn't planned on, but it's really the loss of revenues that's impacting the city and the community.
Thank you, Kim. So last question, and then I'll give you guys all an opportunity to share some closing thoughts. But Gary, are there any other revenue sources that the city can tap into to make up for some of these losses?
You know, we have Steamboat Springs, and I've been plugged into Steamboat for the last 30 years and followed you guys for a long time. It's great to be working here and love to have a positive impact on the city. We've always been good at grant writing, and I give a lot of credit to that to Winnie Della Quadri and her employee Ginger Scott. They have just stayed on top of all of the COVID-19 grants and programs to help us out, and it's paid off. So we've got close to $1 million. You saw in Kim's pie earlier, $930,000 to help offset some of our expenses, and that has certainly been helpful. The downside of that is you can't depend upon grants. They are not a reliable source of income. So even when we're budgeting, we can't really say, unless there's a long history of getting grants for, like, police department bulletproof vests. I mean, it's a small grant, but that comes in pretty much regularly every year. You got to apply for it, you got to justify it, and our staff's been really good at being consistent with that. So we'll continue to look at grants, but it's not reliable. The other ones that you look at when you're in a budget crunch are usually user fees. And we've looked at those for the last 4 years, and we've upped those because we were way cheaper than everybody else for hosting special events. I mean, we were a gratuitous organization in terms of what we provided to a lot of the event organizers. And it was great because some of the nonprofits had very worthy causes, but other ones were out of town producers that come in and make a pile of money and leave town, and we'd be helping subsidize that. So we've adjusted our user fees upwards, not only for events, but for leasing of city facilities, including our parks and rec facilities, buildings, so forth and so on. So that we've kind of done what we could do there, but it doesn't hurt to reevaluate those user fees. And last but not least are our taxes. And I talked about having the importance of having diversity in our tax base. That's been a council priority for the last 3 years. Fiscal sustainability. Fiscal sustainability means having a diverse revenue base and mitigating the risk. So when something like this happens, we're not as severely impacted. It's just like diversifying an investment portfolio. So you got some that go up and some that go down, but in the long run, they're pretty stable. And but that requires a vote of the people. So I hear it all the time from people on the street. When's the city going to get a general property tax? And I don't know. It's up to you all. It would really help the city to have kind of a baseline or a basis to say, you know what, we're going to have this general property tax coming in to make sure that we can fund police, fire, streets, and the essential core services on a consistent basis without having to impact those every time there's a downturn in the economy. So those are the big ones that I looked at, and I'll ask Kim if I missed anything, or did you want to weigh in on that, Kim, with anything else?
No, I think you covered it well.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you all. We are just down to the closing portion. So I would just invite you guys, if there was something you didn't get to say or have some closing thoughts for our audience. Angela, we'll start with you.
Sorry there, took a second to get unmuted. No, just emphasizing a lot of the things we've already talked about, being patient and kind with our city as we go through service reductions and understanding what that means. There's been a lot of people already out offering assistance or picking up garbage or firework debris. So thank you to everybody doing that. If you could continue to help us in any way possible with examples like that, that would be wonderful. And no, we just look forward to continuing as many services as we possibly can to our community and helping everybody stay safe and keep mentally and physically active as we work through this pandemic.
Thank you, Angela. John, what would you say in closing?
You know, in closing, I think what's true for the city is true for everybody right now, and that adaptability is key. 2.5 months ago, we didn't know what to expect for Memorial Day. And sitting here today, we don't know what to expect for the 4th of July or for Labor Day. We just don't know. But I'm confident in the city's ability to adapt. We have talented individuals, and we have individuals that are very dedicated to a life of service, and we're going to figure it out. You know, I think we're all under a tremendous amount of stress right now. You know, are we going to keep our jobs? How are we going to homeschool our children? How do I keep my family safe? How do we stay sane? But I think one thing that we can assure you of is what you don't need to worry about is the provision of essential core services. You know, we're here for you. And we got this. We're going to get through it, and that vaccine's going to come, and life is going to return to normal.
Thank you, John. Kim, how about you? What would you say in closing?
Yeah, I echo what Angela and John have said, and I just really feel like we have such a strong community, and we're all working together really hard to look out for the long term for our community. And you know, us in particular, we're looking at the long-term fiscal sustainability of the city and make sure that we can offer these great services that we have offered to the community for years and years to come. And so we're making these short-term accommodations to protect the long-term goals of our city and our community. And I really appreciate the patience and the hard work of both of our staff and of our entire community. And it's there have been a lot of silver linings, and I appreciate what everyone has done.
Thank you, Kim. And Gary, we'll let you close us out.
Great, thanks, Lisa. And first, I do want to thank you again for your participation with these panels. You've been here consistently and way exceeded my expectations in terms of being able to host these and get the word out from us locals in terms of what's going on. And you've had some very moving panel discussions, many of them that brought a tear to my eye, seriously. And I really appreciate that. So, but that goes to the point of this is a collective effort. You know, this is something where we need to band together to beat this thing. And we need to be consistent with it. And that's that would be my appeal to the community, that we do need to continue to practice the public health protocols. We have been successful in flattening the curve, and that's because we work together to do that. So I don't think we can just say, oh, we're there now, just, you know, throw caution to the wind and you know, throw your mask into the wind. I think we're going to have to continue to embrace these public health protocols, and I would encourage everybody to follow those public health orders that we get from the governor and from the County Board of Health. I got to acknowledge them as well. They've been in a really high-profile publicly visible position, trying to balance all the different interests. And you know, the final messages that I would convey would just to be to help others and be considerate. And everybody had said the word patient. I think we need to be patient. We need to be persistent. That's what I've found, that anything I wanted to achieve in life, I'd set a goal for it. I would just be persistent. Sometimes it took years. Sometimes it takes years, you know, to achieve your goals. But I think we just need to be persistent. We need to continue to have hope, and we need to have gratitude for those things that we do have. And all we need to do is look around and see what we've got here. There's a lot of things to be thankful for. And I'm thankful for this community, and I'm thankful for their support as we get through this crisis. So, and thank you again.
Thank you everyone for tuning in this morning. And in particular, thank each one of you for participating. I know you all are very busy, and that's a silver lining for me, is that we have leaders like you working really hard to minimize the impacts of this time that is kind of tough for everyone. So thank you for your optimism, and thank you for your hard work. And I am just continually thankful that I'm experiencing COVID-19 here in Steamboat Springs. So thank you all. We will continue to have panels. I believe we are probably going to be going into the one panel a week mode versus two. I know we're looking at inviting some of our neighbors from Hayden and Oak Creek to talk about how they have been impacted. And I know we also are anxious to put together a panel about the next reopening phase. So we will look to possibly do that next week. So again, thank you to everyone who has tuned in. And again, thank you guys on the panel for your time this morning. I hope everyone has a great day and gets out and enjoys the sunshine. Thank you.